As you just heard in the news bulletin, earlier today, two brothers were found guilty of killing Damilola Taylor by a jury at the Old Bailey in London. Winifred Robinson has spent the last year following the police and prosecution teams pursuing the case. Now, in a special report that includes some very strong language, we join her for Damilola, the search for justice.
There's a little boy around here, love. I think he's been stabbed or something. There's blood all over the place.
What happened?
We do not know, sir. We've just come out and found him on the staircase.
Where is he bleeding from?
We cannot tell.
It was November 2000, and the child whose life was ebbing away on the stairwell to a block of flats in Peckham in southeast London would soon be identified as Damilola Taylor, who was 10.
Is he breathing?
Is he still breathing? Is he still breathing, Tony? He's still breathing.
He's definitely breathing, yeah?
He's still breathing, yeah.
Drops of his blood would eventually lead the police to his killers. Today at the Old Bailey, Ricky Preddy, aged 19, and his brother Danny, 18, were convicted of manslaughter. It was a retrial. Earlier this year, another jury cleared both brothers of murder, but failed to agree on the lesser charge of manslaughter.
A coat over his body to keep him warm.
Yeah, we've got that. But he's in a very bad way.
And he's bleeding heavily, yeah?
I was the duty officer in charge of a response team. It was a dreadful sight. There was blood going right up the stairs. He'd obviously, in a panic, ran further up the stairs. Where he was actually heading, I don't know, because at first we thought he may live in the top of the flat, but he didn't.
Is he awake?
No, he keeps drifting off.
Is the ambulance there?
The ambulance is not here yet, but the police are.
The police are there, yeah?
Gloria and Richard Taylor, both from Nigeria, met and married in England and had their first two children, a girl and a boy, before going back to Nigeria, where Damilola was born. Mrs. Taylor had returned with the children to England 3 months before Damilola was killed to try to get medical help for her daughter, who has epilepsy. They were staying with her relatives in Peckham in southeast London. Damilola, the youngest child, had been enrolled at a local primary school.
I was expecting him back home while I didn't see him, and I went out to look for him. I saw the head teacher coming out of the school, locking the door, and I told him, that I didn't see Damilola. Then he told me that, okay, I should report to the police. It was Daddy told me that something happened on the road. And I said, what happened? He said a boy was, stabbed. Immediately I knew, it would be him.
He couldn't go back down the stairwell because he felt those who attacked him were there. We are still down there, and the distance between where he was to the house was about 50 yards.
Unfortunately, before they got him to the hospital, he has already died. And I got to the hospital and confirmed that it was the one, it's my son.
Soon, witnesses began to contact the police. Roger Barton had seen Damilola crossing the street outside Peckham Library.
It was about 4:30 in the afternoon. The evening was just drawing in. It was dusk. It was getting to be dark. I had the headlights on my car, but it wasn't quite dark yet. And it was one of those grey and miserable sort of winter evenings just drawing in. And I stopped the car and just let this gang of lads walk across, some distance in front of my car to cross the road. And I remember it very clearly because one of the youths, a much smaller, younger boy, poked his head out effectively from the side and gave me a great big cheery grin, a lovely smile. And I just remember thinking, he seems like a happy lad, happiest little soul you can imagine, with a group of his older friends. I saw on TV this film of a little boy skipping and hopping near Peckham Library. I remembered very clearly the coat that he was wearing was the same coat as the lad who gave me the beaming smile, and it was just with complete horror I realised that I'd seen Damilola Taylor just before he was murdered.
Acting on information from the public, the police quickly began to make arrests.
Police have arrested 11 boys over the murder of Damilola Taylor. The 10-year-old bled to death on the estate where he lived.
6 a.m, 2 black youths and a black woman aged 39.
Officers interviewed more than a dozen suspects. Clothes were taken and sent for testing. The forensic scientists had turned up nothing of significance when a young girl, perhaps attracted by the promise of a £50,000 reward, contacted the police claiming to have seen the whole thing.
Witness Bromley came forward and she named the people that she said had committed the assault. The attention of the inquiry team was then focused on those 4 individuals, and a huge amount of work was done on the items that had been taken from those individuals.
It was one of the most memorable bits of the trial, videotaped police interviews with Bromley singing "I'm in the money" and "Gimme, gimme, gimme my 50,000.
Tonight, 2 16-year-old brothers are free after being found not guilty of the murder of 10-year-old Damilola Taylor in Peckham in South London. The police denied the case had been a fiasco and said they did their job as best.
There had been no forensic evidence linking any of the accused in that first trial to the killing of Damilola Taylor. Not a speck of blood, not a fibre, not a scrap of DNA. The police and Crown Prosecution Service were criticised for pressing ahead with the case. When it ended, the inquiry was reopened and a new senior investigating officer appointed, Detective Superintendent Nick Fgrave.
I had the luxury of not having to pursue that line of inquiry because it had already been done. And also I could say to myself, well, let's wind the clock back to the day before Bromley came along. What would I have done on that day? And of course, if you take that approach, you end up going down a different track. The next most obvious line of inquiry for me was a scientific one. We did pick up all of Damilola's clothing from the scene and from the post-mortem, and 11 or 12 people were arrested the first time, and all of their clothing was seized. So there was a lot of material there that could possibly yield some clues.
When an item comes into the laboratory for examination, the first thing we do is we look at the packaging and make sure that that's secure.
The items had been examined in the early days of the initial inquiry by scientists working for the Forensic Science Service. Once part of the Home Office, it's now a government-sponsored company, and it does most of the work for police forces in England and Wales. Scientists there had found nothing significant. This time, a different company was used, the Forensic Alliance, with very different results.
And remove the item for examination.
A brown spot on a training shoe, seen, photographed and catalogued by the first forensic science team, had tested negative for blood. When it was tested afresh by Ros Hammond, she got a positive result.
The stain that we found was a splash or spot of blood, which was about 1 centimetre long and 0.5 centimetre wide.
So you could see it with the naked eye?
Yes, I could. We then carried out a presumptive test for blood. We take a piece of filter paper and we fold it into 4, and we just rub the surface quite lightly. And then I just unfold the piece of paper and apply 2 chemicals to the paper.
Those 2 liquids are seeping out. If there were blood present on the shoe, what happens?
What I would see is an area of staining which would appear in the middle of the filter paper almost immediately.
When the filter paper turned pink, the forensic scientist, Ros Hammond, repeated the test again, and again detected blood. A sample was sent for DNA testing. It was a perfect match with Damilola Taylor.
I was out in, I think I was in Norbury actually, and my exhibits officer phoned me up on the mobile, and he told me in the news that they'd found Damilola's blood on this item, and I didn't really believe him initially. It was just the best thing that can happen as an investigator when you get something like that so unexpectedly turn up. It seemed incredible really that blood could have been missed the first time given the high profile nature of the investigation, so myself and most of my colleagues were very, very surprised.
There are some possibilities of performing the test and it not working. The chemicals have a limited shelf life and they can go out of date. If you were to swap the bottles round and apply the chemicals in the wrong order, then the test won't give a positive result.
As the jury would later be told, the reasons for the initial failure to detect the blood, either technical problems or human error, needn't concern them. The important thing was the new result.
Almost a second thought you get is, well, was it, how, if it was missed, then the questions might be asked about, was it there initially? And we made some inquiries and looked at all the laboratory submission forms, and thankfully a Polaroid photograph had been taken on the day of submission, and the photograph shows a staining on the heel in exactly the right place where the blood was found. So we were fairly certain we could show that the blood on the training shoe was there, when we submitted it the first time to the laboratory, which was, only a matter of days after the murder. It was a weight off our shoulders because people can make all sorts of allegations about contamination and planting evidence and all the rest of it, and this photograph cut those away in one fell swoop, really.
The training shoe was among clothing taken from the bedroom of the first boy to be arrested in the days after Damilola's death. Danny Preddy, then aged 12, lived with his mother and older brother Ricky not far from Blake's Road, where Damilola was attacked. On the day of the killing, he'd been remanded to a children's home, again not far from the scene of the crime. He stood out there, even among the difficult customers passing through, according to Meg Halliday, one of the assistant managers.
What I can't forget is his disruptive nature. He was very disruptive, influence on the unit. Once he's on the unit won't be settled. He will stand at the door and abuse passerby, everybody. That was how he was.
Danny Preddy's training shoe had yet more evidence to reveal. The lab's expert on fibres, Tian and coil, was called in by Ros Hammond when she examined the bloodstain further.
Because it was an oval stain, it had the appearance of a stain that had arisen from a drop of blood falling onto the shoe. I examined it using a microscope and I could see that there were some fibres actually stuck within the blood staining.
Fibres you wouldn't normally expect to find in bloodstain, so that was a significant finding in itself. One was a blue polyester fibre that was particularly badly damaged, and there were 2 black cotton fibres also present in the bloodstain. We found that the fibre, the blue polyester fibre on the trainer was microscopically and chemically indistinguishable to the blue polyester fibres from Damilola's trousers, and also those that were present on the bottle that appears to have been used to stab Damilola.
A second item, which scientists at the Forensic Science Service had declared free of blood, tested positive this time. A black sweatshirt taken from the Preddy home was stained at the cuff with Damilola's blood. The sweatshirt had come from among the older brother Ricky Preddy's things.
It was very surprising. I had never experienced it before. And the reason I'd submitted clothing and other items to a separate laboratory wasn't because I anticipated this would happen. It was more to do with new techniques and checking, but not checking for misses. I hadn't thought that was a very likely scenario. So I was, extremely surprised. Then when it became apparent that had happened not once but twice with different individuals, more surprised still, and you start then to wonder what else will come out.
When Forensic Alliance scientists had completed their work, the case against the Preddy brothers was building. In addition to the blood, they found on Danny Preddy's clothes 13 red fibres matching Damilola's school sweatshirt, and 2 fibres matching his school trousers. On Ricky's clothes, 2 red sweatshirt fibres were found. And also a small number of fibres that could have come from Ricky and Danny Preddy's clothes were on the silver puffer jacket that Damilola Taylor was wearing when he was attacked. The police set about tracing the people that the Preddys had mixed with at the time, and so opened up a fresh seam of evidence. Those who claimed the boys had privately confessed to the killing.
The case wasn't just scientific, although that formed a significant part of it. Aligned to that were inquiries relating to other people that may have associated with the defendants at the time of the murder, and it was very important to check that all those people have been seen and seen again, and seen a third time and a fourth time if necessary. Of those 500 or 600 people, we identified 2 individuals overlooked the first time who gave us confessional evidence.
The 2 new witnesses were in contact with the brothers at the time of Damilola's murder. They said they had heard them confess to it. One of the witnesses was traced by Detective Constable Chris James.
How I found him was a mobile number. That's all I had. I didn't have an address or anything like that. I didn't even have a surname for him. I just had his contact mobile number, and essentially it was just, he answered it. He picked it up and answered it. The moment that he answered it and told me what he had to say became so important that I met him at Stratford Police Station that same day.
For me, it was a real moment when Chris phoned me up to tell me that he'd identified this individual. It was really a tremendous jump forward because it corroborated and cemented in place, really, the forensic results we were starting to get.
He actually turned up and we conducted a video-audio interview of him. We had a typist there who actually typed it up, but he didn't want to hang around because he had a rave to go to that night. So he only signed 4 pages of a 6-page statement. It took me 11 months and 28 days before we actually signed those last 2 pages of that 6-page statement.
The lawyers decided that there was sufficient evidence there to charge, and then it was tremendous relief all round. I mean, it was huge relief that we got to that point, and that was again a very significant moment for me, having been given this job all that, that time ago, to actually now be in a position where I'm in the charge room standing opposite these people and they're being charged and the charges are being read out, and huge moment and a very satisfying moment.
Danny and Ricky Preddy offered no innocent explanation as to how these bloodstains and fibres had got onto their clothes. When the brothers stood in the dock to face their first trial back in January, Tony Connell, for the Crown Prosecution Service, was cautiously optimistic.
It is simply another factor that the law will permit the jury to consider. They can draw what's called an adverse inference from their silence. We will be asking for that adverse inference to be drawn. The defence will no doubt object, and we'll say to the judge, well, these defendants have had the opportunity to consider the matter over many, many months since they were arrested, and that if they don't choose to give evidence, that a jury are entitled to draw an adverse inference from that fact.
The brothers, boys when the crime was committed, were by now stocky young men. As they stood behind the protective glass at the Old Bailey, Danny, the younger brother, with a heart-shaped, almost pretty face, his hair in corn weaves to the nape of his neck, smiled and waved at his mother in the public gallery, and she blew kisses at him. His big brother, Ricky, with short, cropped hair, looked straight ahead, a muscle twitching in his jaw.
I think they'd never been given boundaries in the home. My feeling is that whatever they did, and there was no comeback, there was no consequence. But certainly when we were looking at them, they were unwilling to accept rules, unable to manage anger, unable to manage disappointment, unable to accept that they can't do something, unable to interact with other children or anything other than a level of bully victim.
Damilola's parents, Richard and Gloria Taylor, were in court as the pathologist explained how their son bled to death from a single stab wound to the thigh inflicted with a broken bottle. They were supported by Polly Mills and Mark Shackle, their police liaison officers.
They're just really nice people, and I hope we get a result at the end of this trial and they can begin afresh, because I still, all the time that there's been the hope that there is going to be a new trial, now there's a new trial, once again they still can't let this matter rest.
Whether we will know 100% ever what happened in the greatest detail, I don't know. It would be nice to think that one day they might know, and that might help.
If we are able to see what actually transpired, it may still, have some bad effect on us, but we have them, the family liaison officers, at the end of the day, always come back home with us, sit with us, find out how we can be able to cope.
Today was pathology, as you know, and I was concerned that Mr. and Mrs. Taylor would be distressed by what they would hear and possibly what they would see. The pathologist referred to photographs, and there were some photographs from the post-mortem. I didn't want Mr. and Mrs. Taylor to be distressed by seeing those, even if they're not given the copy, if they happen to see over someone's shoulder.
So they always take us out when situations like that occur, so that it doesn't continue, we don't get upset about what we hear or what we see.
But I want to listen. We listen to it just to know what has happened. It doesn't take the pain away, but I just listen.
The recounting of the facts, so far as they're known, went smoothly enough. The evidence of alleged confessions, recounted by witnesses who knew the Preddys or had encountered them in children's homes or detention centres, was always going to be much more tricky, and so it proved, beginning with a young woman, 15 at the time of the killing, who had contacted the police soon afterwards because of what she claimed the younger brother, Danny Preddy, had told her.
It'll be quite an important day for us tomorrow, and a difficult day for that witness, I should imagine. She's obviously very anxious about coming, doesn't particularly want to come, but none of us do. Coming to court is pretty frightening for anybody.
He just explained to me that, it was him and his friends that was involved in Damilola dying and stuff. And Damilola was in the library and they started picking on him there. They had a fight before or something, and Then when they saw him again at the library, that it just relighted it. And then they followed him home. What I remember most is that he said that he didn't mean for him to die, that it was an accident, hence why they stabbed him in his leg. But they didn't know, obviously, that by him moving around, that it helped him to die.
But the park bench outside Peckham Library, where the alleged confession was made, has intermittent CCTV coverage. Lawyers for the younger brother were able to demonstrate that the witness and he were not there on the day and time that she recalled. And, as Detective Superintendent Nick Fgrave explains, the CCTV images for other days and times were incomplete.
You then start to think, why is that? And I suppose one explanation, she's making it all up. Another explanation is she's got the time wrong. And the third explanation is she's got the day wrong. She maintained, however, the truthfulness of her account, and the fact that it wasn't corroborated by CCTV damaged that, but whether it fatally damaged it, I don't know.
There would be more damage inflicted. The girl has a criminal record, a single offence of theft. Proof, as the defence pointed out, that she is capable of dishonesty.
It's the defence's job to test the credibility of the witness. So, you know, I have no complaint, but I just wasn't expecting at that point, and I thought she dealt with it very well.
For me, stealing has got nothing to do with someone killing someone, but everything about me was brought out. For what reason, I don't understand, because at the end of the day, I was 15 then when this happened. I didn't want to come to court in the first place. I didn't want to go to the police in the first place.
I prosecuted in this city for 20 years. And I can tell you that in a large part of this city, it is nearly impossible to bring any case which doesn't involve witnesses whose character can be attacked. If the only cases you ever prosecuted involve blameless individuals...
But many cases do involve blameless individuals,
of course
particularly
they do.
as witnesses.
Well, but what a jury makes of a witness is a matter for them, and that's why we trust that system.
Yes, I'm not suggesting it's unfair to anyone involved. What I'm suggesting is it makes your job extremely difficult.
Well, of course it is, but then, you know, I'm paid to prosecute difficult and serious cases, and that's why I enjoy the job. Yeah, it's a tough task. It's not a shoplifting case, I accept that.
The next of the confession witnesses also had a criminal record. The man who Detective Constable Chris James had had such trouble tracking down would be in prison by the time of the trial. In his statement to the police, he had said that the older brother told him that he had stabbed Damilola Taylor, and even demonstrated how the blow was struck. His account also implicated the younger brother, because he claimed Ricky had told him that his younger brother was there. Chris James was looking forward to hearing this witness giving his evidence.
He's been in prison some time, having completed an armed robbery last September. You know, this is a day that we've talked about now for 2 years. He knows how important it is. So I've got no worries that he'll deliver. He stayed at a care home with one of the defendants, and they got talking about the Damilola Taylor murder. That defendant then confessed to him, and he showed him how he committed the actual offence. So, you know, good stuff for us, bad stuff for him.
The witness, though, was about to become bad stuff for the prosecution team as well. He'd decided he didn't want to give evidence against the brothers after all.
His auntie has gone back to square one with him, so we either drag him up to court, kicking and screaming, and not going to do our case any good at all. So do you drop him, or do you play him, or it could be a problem. If I can't speak to him, then I can't give him a job. It's 2 years' worth of work going down down the Swanee. Yeah, that would be annoying. There you go. Yeah, that's really annoying. There's a lot riding on this bloke.
The police officers consulted Tony Connell, the leading lawyer with the Crown Prosecution Service, who had overall responsibility for bringing the case. He agreed that the witness should be given time to see if he'd change his mind.
It's a very important witness, and to say that we're just, well, it's all too difficult, we're not going to be bothered, it would be an abrogation of our responsibility, we're not going to do it. That said, in due course, we're going to have to take a decision. We just don't have to take a decision now at 1:45 when we can defer it till 2 o'clock and possibly till 10:30 tomorrow.
For Chris James, the tension was becoming unbearable.
It all comes down to individual officers like me to make this happen. Yeah, it's quite a bit of pressure, really. be a bit of pressure on me over the lunchtime period. I was going to give up smoking this year as well.
Despite the best efforts of the prosecution team, the witness would not repeat before the jury the evidence that he had given to the police. He took the witness stand only to confirm that this was his position, and he refused to answer any questions. The judge eventually allowed his statement to the police to be read out in court. So what the prosecution had hoped would be two convincing accounts had fallen flat. We were approached at the end of the brothers' first trial by one member of the deadlock jury who, unusually for a case like this, wanted to reflect publicly on how the evidence had appeared to her.
The CCTV outside the library was supposed to show a witness talking to one of the boys, and the sequence was shown from way before the time supposedly he was there and after, and there was nobody there, just empty. There was just nothing. And how can you say yes?
What about the prisoner who was brought into court?
Well, he was didn't want to talk right from the beginning, and actually he couldn't understand a lot what he was saying. His accent was very garbled, and he was just a witness that didn't want to tell.
The worst blow to the prosecution case came when the defence barristers exposed flaws in police procedures which potentially undermined some of the fibres evidence. A school sweatshirt, identical to Damilola's, had been used in some of the media appeals for witnesses. It should have been catalogued as an exhibit and its return or storage noted. But when the defence asked to examine this replica sweatshirt, it couldn't be traced. Much to Nick F. Graves' dismay, this left it open to the defence to suggest that one of the police officers who arrested Danny Preddy could have accidentally transferred red fibres from the replica sweatshirt onto the suspect's clothes.
So it was an innocuous request that led to this issue becoming an issue. And because it was such a surprise to us, it was painful to see a lot of good evidence being damaged by that point.
The fibres specialist who examined the younger brother's clothes had found 13 red fibres matching Damilola's school sweatshirt. Tin and Coyle came to the witness stand at the trial, completely unaware of any replica shirt handled by the police.
It was upsetting in the sense that I didn't have that information going in to the case, because that would have enabled me to assess whether such an examination would be worth doing. I mean, it's not a blow in the sense that I was gutted that it happened, because of course it has happened.
The suggestion is that it's possible that the officer that handled it became contaminated and then went to one of the searches. Another scenario that was put forward is that the car that the officer used to take the sweatshirt could have been used to transport Danny Preddy from Abbey Street to where he was held in custody at Wimbledon. No one's saying that's what's happened. What the defence is saying is it is a possibility.
I was disappointed that the item didn't enter the exhibit system, because the police, even with the best will in the world, can only maintain records and continuity records when things enter their systems. Because whilst it was established that this jumper did exist and was part of the police dealings in the early days, what couldn't be established is exactly what happened between the seizure of that jumper and the arrest of this particular suspect, and that was disappointing.
I felt dreadful. Partly because I hadn't seen it, partly because there's nothing I could do about it. It wasn't fixable. There's nothing more frustrating than seeing a fault and not being able to fix it. Couldn't be fixed because it had happened a long time ago, and what's been done has been done. And you just keep going round and round and round, thinking about what this might mean. I was saying to myself, it's not the end of it's not the end of the world by any means. It was just painful to see it happen. It takes a little while to get used to the idea that the evidence that you're now providing is weakened to a degree, and you then start worrying about the consequences of that and what the knock-on effect might be.
Whether or not that's made a fundamental difference to the integrity of the evidence will be a matter for the jury. We say not. It would have been obviously better had they wearing protective clothing and the like, such as to preserve the integrity of the exhibits. But I think that has to be seen in the context of the dozens of people that were arrested, the thousands of exhibits that were seized, the length of this inquiry, and sometimes you just have to move fast.
But when you realised what had happened with regard to the sweatshirt, I mean,
Well,
did you think, hey-ho, or did you
well,
think, I don't believe it?
I wasn't ecstatic.
The officer involved told the court that he thought he'd returned the replica sweatshirt to Damilola's school immediately after it was used in the witness appeals, but he couldn't really remember. He had a tough time of it from Orlando Parnell QC, Danny Preddy's defence counsel. Their words are spoken by actors.
What happened to the sweatshirt after the photo was taken?
I don't know.
But you had it.
It was passed to me at the school.
Your recollection on the 23rd of January was that it wasn't wrapped in anything.
I can't honestly remember. I remember going to the school and it being passed to me.
The sweatshirt could have been in your vehicle for some days, couldn't it?
Ridiculous. It's something I would never do.
Why not?
Whatever the pace, pressures and stress of the early days of a murder inquiry, the juror who spoke to us was puzzled by the officer's poor recollection of events.
A case like that, being of such national interest, surely you can't forget that you took part in collecting evidence or whatever. And the I don't remember, didn't give you a feeling of confidence.
Where is it now?
I'm sure you'll tell me.
Do you know where it is?
No.
The problem is that at the very least there is a real possibility that your car and you had fibres from that burgundy sweatshirt.
Ridiculous.
The officer who handled the replica sweatshirt had had no dealings with the older brother Ricky, and he had 2 red sweatshirt fibres on his things. And even discounting the 13 red sweatshirt fibres on Danny Preddy's clothes, there remained other fibres matching Damilola's trousers.
There still remained the 2 blue viscose fibres from Damilola's trousers that couldn't be explained by any kind of contamination from the police officers. So even though the red fibres potentially could have been explained through this route, there still remained the 2 blue viscose fibres.
In police interviews, Ricky Preddy claimed he was at a training centre at the time Damilola was attacked. When police told him they could prove that wasn't true, he broke down and said he was with friends. But Danny, who had answered no comment to all of the police questions, had an alibi. It was provided by Meg Halliday. She was among staff supervising Danny at the children's home, and she was adamant that he was at the home at the crucial time.
The boy couldn't have been in Peckham to kill Damilola Taylor, at the same time be on the unit. It's impossible. Now, what the prosecution is trying to say is that the boy left the unit to Peckham, committed the murder, and came back. For what I know, to the best of my knowledge, my recollection, all the logs,